My name is Dwayne, and I'm an off-grid homesteader. I am building a homestead from the ground up. I am building completely off-grid, and I tried to build everything with as many alternative building materials as possible. Two reasons. Number one, costs, and number two, there's just so much extra stuff out there that's not being used that you can use to build with. I was in the trades, and being a welder, I already knew this, but there's a lot of waste material out there that, say, a contractor or a house builder, they'll get a certain amount of materials for a job, and the way the codes work with a house, for example, is you're not allowed to use partial pieces for the siding on a house, for example. So companies will just throw it in the garbage because it's quicker. And it's about making money. It's not about conserving materials. What you realize quickly is that there is so much garbage and waste generated from the building process, specifically in the United States, that I saw that as very problematic for me just on my own conscience when I started building out here and realizing that there's a better way to do it that may take longer, and I might have to put more effort into it and more sweat equity, but the end result is something that I used almost every piece of the material I could. The biggest thing that I've found a use for, which it's not a secret, people have been doing this for a long, long time, are pallets. A small business will get orders on pallets. They don't have a way to get rid of these pallets, and so they'll be more than happy for you to come and get them and take them off their hands. And some of these pallets are made with hardwoods such as oak. I've even found walnut on pallets, and there are about 1,000 different things you can do with pallets. I call them adult Legos because you literally can use them like Legos, and that's one of the big ones that I've found a use for. I literally used to go to the dumpsters at construction sites, and I would pull 10-foot pieces of pipe out of the garbage. I would pull half sheets of OSB, 2x4s, 2x6s, find boxes of brackets. There's just endless amount of waste that goes into building houses. A big thing I realized was that I had a problem with sports drinks. I used to drink Gatorades and Powerades, and I didn't really realize how bad the problem was until I started recycling my own garbage out here, and I had nowhere to put it because I don't have a company that's coming and getting my garbage every week. It helped me two ways. Number one, it helped me to not drink as much of it and try not to use as much plastic because I have an intimate understanding of where it goes or where it doesn't go. And then also it helped me to try to figure out ways to reuse that product. So I use those sports bottles, I use them for a lot of my gardening. I think it's probably one of the biggest problems that we have when it comes to the environment is almost everything we do now is either taken care of by a corporation or taken care of by a government or some other entity, and almost everything is out of sight, out of mind. So when you get your garbage taken away, all that you know is that it either goes in this color bin or this color bin. But you don't actually have to go take the bin over to the place and then follow that trail of where does that end up. And a lot of times if people knew the answer to that alone, just that alone, they would change the way they do things, because you start understanding real quick. You're like, no, it doesn't just magically disappear. This garbage has to go somewhere. Batteries have to go somewhere. Waste products from oil is a big one. It's like I change oil in my cars now because that's part of what I do out here for self-sufficiency. And now I realize, the oil just doesn't magically disappear. You have to dispose of it properly. So absolutely, out of sight, out of mind is in my opinion, probably the biggest problem. I think that with water too. The water problem to me is one of the first things you learn trying to build a homestead in the desert from the ground up is that you realize water is life and water is everything out here. The fact of the matter is that we live in a desert, and this water is either coming from the ground or it's coming from somewhere else. All right, and it's making its way over here. The water situation for us, out of sight, out of mind, the way it works out here is that you can pay to have a well dug. You can have it as many feet deep as you want it. And then once that well's dug, you have an endless supply of water. But the reality of it is there is a finite amount of water underneath us. And we're going to have a reckoning someday with this because we have corporations that have come into the county that are taking water out millions of gallons at a time and not replenishing this water fast enough. So one of the things that I learned right away out here was how valuable water really is. And I have to account for almost every single drop of water I use out here. So whether it's gray water, black water, sewage water, drinking water, Water for my shower, water for my clothing, water for the animals, water for plants. All of these things require water. And if you don't have a system in place out here to figure out how you're going to get water, then you're missing probably the biggest, most important part of homesteading in the desert. We, as a family, chose things that were important to us that we didn't want to give up, like high-speed internet, like Netflix. For me, sports drinks, I still like sports drinks, I still like junk food. So, you know, there's definitely things that we do give up, but you don't have to. A lot of times it just depends on how much money you have, honestly. A lot of times people can buy their way out of these problems. But to do it in a responsible way and to do it in a way that jives with the way I try to live my life and try to live somewhat in harmony with nature and trying my best to, you know, be responsible for the environment, it can be very uncomfortable at times. And I think that is something that a lot of people would not be willing to do this. And that's part of the reason that goes back to that question of out of sight, out of mind. Absolutely. Here, everything's in my sight and everything's on my mind all the time because I have to think about it. There's so many benefits to doing manual labor. And I think we overlook that as a society, especially in the United States, is that manual labor does so much for you. It helps you physically and it helps you mentally. Mentally, it helps you by giving you a lot of time to think. You can be introspective about your life, about what you're doing, why you're doing it. And one of the things that's nice out here is when I was building the earth bag building, I would spend months out here by myself, completely doing everything by myself and thinking about just about everything. I would think a common misconception is that people that live off grid are dirty hillbillies. That would probably be a big one, or something like that. To be honest, there's actually all kinds that do this. Some of them do it by choice, some of them don't. But I would say that's probably the biggest misconception that I've seen so far. It's just people's perception of what that means, you know. Well, my reason for being out here is mixed martial arts and HOAs. Way long ago, back in the late 90s, early 2000, I was a semi-pro fighter. I fought middleweight and I met my wife doing it. I breathed it, I lived it. It was my life. That's all I did was train. While I was fighting, I was also working as a corrections officer, and I thought I was going to be doing law enforcement for the rest of my life. And life happens, things happen. To give you the short version, you know, I started having a lot of injuries. I couldn't perform the way I wanted to perform, and I got married, and there were just a lot of things. And at the time, mixed martial arts back in that time period was not a really good moneymaker. That's why I was always semi-pro, because I always had to do something else. And so I had to realize that, and part of that came with that was there was a certain depression that came after doing something physically for so long. You know, your body's just used to it, and it's just something you want to do all the time. And then realizing that that's not going to be your life anymore. I definitely went through, I would say, a mild depression. I really had to find something else to keep my mind occupied while I was figuring out my life. I had read an article about the benefits of gardening and gardening to combat depression. It didn't take at first, but then after a while I realized, I said, you know, I think I want to practice gardening, because I was trying to eat healthier at the time, and then I was realizing how much money I was spending on produce. And I did grow up farming, so I knew about farming, and I realized that you know, I could do this, I could grow this stuff myself. I tend to have addictive personality, and I get stuck on something, and I want to do the best I can do at it, much like the fighting spirit. So I failed at garden miserably, and a lot of people will tell you this. You start gardening, you think you got it figured out, or you think you're going to do well at it, and I failed at it every aspect. And gardening in the desert is a completely different challenge. I failed at it, but I kept doing it, and I just kept doing it. I've heard other people say this, but like, if you had to pick like a gateway to homesteading, some people will say chickens, I will say gardening. Gardening was a gateway to homesteading, which the way I define homesteading is living a lifestyle of self-sufficiency. To live a lifestyle of self-sufficiency, I feel that almost anybody can do it, because whether you're living in the suburban, you know, house, or you're living out on a farm, a lifestyle of self-sufficiency means that you practice a lifestyle to be self-sufficient. to me, that really stuck with me as something, wow, I can totally homestead. Now people think of homesteading, they automatically equate it with land, and we'll get to that, how I got there. Ultimately, I realized I don't need to have a big farm to do this lifestyle. So homesteading with me started with self-sufficiency. Okay, well, changing oil in my car, that can be self-sufficient. Learning how to garden, that can be self-sufficient. All those things, to me, they check that box, and homesteading checks every single box for me as an ex-fighter, that I can be competitive with it. I can do physical work, which was really important to me, and I could constantly strive to get better at something, and I could do it by myself. That part, to me, is what really got me into homesteading. Now, what got me out here specifically was the HOA, because as I started evolving as a homesteader, and as I started learning more skills, and as I started wanting to do more and more with it, then I decided, hey, I want chickens. Okay, well, I live in an HOA, homeowners association, and it's kind of crazy to me. We do this to ourselves. We buy houses in a HOA because we want to keep our property values high, but at what cost? So the cost was that I have to ask permission to do just about anything. I got chickens, and I felt like a criminal living in my own neighborhood, hiding chickens in my backyard. And then I got a notice because I built a hoop house, and it was too high and it went above my wall, so they made me take it down. And then the final straw was I built a shade structure, and they also told me to take it down. Oh, and I had a couple roosters too, and I didn't want to get rid of them. So, I'm the only guy in the neighborhood with roosters, and roosters are a dead giveaway. So as soon as you have the roosters, it's time to go. As I realized quickly that this was not the lifestyle I wanted. I wanted something where I can have land, I can have space, and I also wanted to build my own house. It was part of the goal I had in becoming a homesteader. My wife and I chose to get land, and that's ultimately the long story of how I got here.
As an independent team of filmmakers, we love producing documentaries for artisans of all trades, honoring skill, passion, and determination. So whether you're a garage baker, homegrown mycologist, backyard farmer, or off-grid homesteader, send us a message and share your story with the world.
I would say since I've been living out here, I've actually been more inclined to talk to my neighbors. You can live in an HOA neighborhood for 15 years and never know your neighbor. I did it. So I actually had neighbors, I had no idea who they were. Out here, I have a neighbor up the road here, is about 3/4 of a mile, and I have a neighbor behind me. And I know them very well. Because one thing that you learn when you live out here, anybody that's close by, they know what you're doing and you know what they're doing. You don't have to be a loner at all. You can be, but they're not mutually exclusive. You can have one and or the other. Self-sufficiency is an idea. It's a lifestyle, but it's not ever attainable, in my opinion, because you always are going to depend on somebody or something for something. I don't care what you built. I don't care how self-sufficient you think you are. You just trace it back to the materials that you're using and say, this steel that I welded together was from China. So somebody made it. So you always, whether you want to believe that or not, are going to rely on somebody for something. You strive to be self-sufficient, meaning that it's a lifestyle choice to where I want to be as self-sufficient as possible, but it doesn't mean that you're ever going to be completely self-sufficient, and I don't think that's healthy, actually. I think we're humans and we're social creatures, so I think it's important to keep social. To me, being self-sufficient is important because we live in a society of instant gratification. Everything that our parents or grandparents used to know how to do, if you notice, we don't know how to do any of it. If you had even an uncle or a grandpa, they almost always knew how to work on a car, right? Or they knew something mechanical. And you can see it happening, as society progresses, we became completely dependent on the machine, basically, and the corporate machine. Everything is controlled by corporations, government, or some other entity. You literally don't have to know how to do anything anymore. And that to me is a scary thing. To me, that's how not to get too political, but that's how your rights slowly get taken away, because you don't even realize they're being taken away until it's too late. And then you want to have chickens, and you go, you're not allowed to have chickens. Why not? Because the HOA says so. Well, why do they say so? Because you moved here. You know, you wanted that. Yeah, I think we have a knack for taking away our own rights and our own privileges, and I think that learning to be self-sufficient is something that I always admired, I guess, about older generations, was that they knew how to do things, you know, and we don't really know how to do much anymore. The hardest part of this is how slow everything goes. That's the hardest part. Like, for me, it's been the worst, because, you know, if you drive by a housing development and you drive by it next week, the houses will already be done or almost done. You ever had that happen? You just go by it, boom, it's done. Out here, it doesn't work that way when you're building on your own. It takes forever. Someone asked me how you build a homestead. I like one day at a time, one piece at a time, one board at a time, because it takes a long time, and that's probably been the hardest part for me, is just things don't move fast enough sometimes. The most rewarding part are moments like this, where I can actually talk about what I'm doing and feel that I'm unique and feel that I'm doing something that a lot of people aren't. The challenge of it, being able to look back at the end of the day and take a look at everything that I've built so far that wasn't here, you know, a year and a half ago. Makes me proud that I could actually now live out here without depending on the outside world for as long as I needed to. I feel proud about that. Now I literally know, I mean, it wouldn't be the most comfortable time. I would be eating eggs every day, but I think I can manage out here without outside help. I have power, I have everything I need. The feeling is, it's kind of a mixed feeling. There's some sadness, actually, because it makes me realize how most people don't realize that this is even an option. It's sad because you feel sometimes like you're on the out fringes of society by just learning how to be self-sufficient. I feel secure in that I can do things, and I feel secure and I feel happy and proud and all these different things, but I do actually sometimes reflect and think I feel kind of sad a little bit that society has gone in the direction to the point where we don't know how to do anything. We don't even know where our food comes from, you know, and that's the reality of it. You need water. That's the first thing I learned. You need water. You need shelter, you need food, and you need help. You need somebody, even if it's YouTube or if it's your wife, your husband, you know, you need help. You can't do this by yourself. Even the ones that are by themselves, you can always go back and trace that it took multiple reasons for that person to get there, you know, and they can always look back and say, somebody inspired me to do this. You know, this inspires people, so you can't say that you inspired yourself. Somebody inspired you. I'd say another misconception is that, oh, this is a big one for me. I get this all the time. Well, you're on the internet, so you're not off-grid. If you look at the definition of being off-grid means I don't rely on public utilities for my power or my water. I am off-grid. But people seem to tie the internet, although it may end up being a utility, in some cases it might be, people think that you can be, because you have internet or high-speed internet, or you watch Netflix or any of that, that you're not off-grid. That's not true at all. In fact, most of the people that are off-grid, especially the ones that have been established, they have just the same comforts everybody else does. And in fact, my house is being built that way. I'm gonna have probably a nicer house than a lot of people. So, you know, I think that's a misconception that you have to live, you know, without. I think what surprises people the most so far is the solar, because people see it and they do exactly what I used to do when I would see something like that. They would see the power wall and just kind of be like, whoa, like, that's so complicated, or it's complex. It is, but it's also not after you've learned it. And that's something that I find really cool, and also I'm proud of that, but also I would say that's one where people are always, I get that all the time. They think that they can't do it. And I think we live in a society where you're not allowed to fail. And I think we have all these safeguards in place to supposedly protect people, but what are you really protecting somebody from? You're protecting them from learning how to do something. You know, so basically the thing is that people see that and they think, oh, I would never be able to learn how to do this. I hear that all the time. And I used to think the same thing. But, you know, after using YouTube and learning and talking to an electrician and doing the research, you figure it out. And I think, you know, that's one of the problems with our society, is that we're not allowed to fail. We're not allowed to learn things. And, you know, and we've done that to ourselves. When I'm building things, one of the things you'll notice when you're out here is that I have probably 7 or 8 projects going on at once. And it's by design, actually, because what I found it does a couple things. Number one, keeps me from getting stale. So if I got to work on the same project day in and day out and then do it for months on end, you get bored, okay? And you get apathy and you get all these negative emotions. But if I have multiple projects going on, I can take a break from it. Say I can take a break from building this shed, and I can go outside and I can build my customer's solar setup. And so for me, my approach is to try to have multiple projects going on at once, although the downfall to that is you got to stay very organized. And that's the trick there, is you have to keep things organized and you have to keep yourself regimented. It's a lot of work, but it's rewarding because slowly but surely I see all of these things getting done. The favorite thing that I'm most proud of is the earth bag building, for sure, because it was a solo project and I know all the hard work that went into that building. It was a labor of love. Another approach that I had out here was that when we first came out here, we got our housing permit, we got all of our ducks in a row, but I did not want to start right away on building a house for obvious reasons. Number one, I've never built a house before. How many mistakes are going to be made building your own house? So I decided the best thing to do was, I'm building more of a farmstead than a homestead. So I wanted to have an operating, profitable farm. I actually want to make money farming. So initially I said, you know, it'd probably make more sense to build the farming buildings first and learn as I go and figure it out that way. So the mistakes that I make on these buildings, which there are plenty, will be less when I build my own house. Now, I'm under no illusions. I 100% realize that a professional drywaller is going to do a better job than me. A professional framer is going to do better than me, etc., etc. But I don't think it should be frowned upon for people to want to do these things on their own. I think it's, you know, there's a certain pride that comes with it. And if I fail, that's on me. I'm going to be building a house out here, and I might hire a couple things out here and there, just depending on where I'm at with the process. But ultimately, I'm building an earth bag house. The house is going to be kind of a hybrid between an earth bag and a traditional build. I'm going to be incorporating some welding and some steel trusses into that design. So it's going to be my own unique build, and part of it's going to be underground. So that was another thing. I want to go underground, because another thing that I've noticed, when you come out to the desert and you stay out in the desert for a while, all the wildlife goes underground to stay cool or to stay warm. And it made me start asking questions. I said, well, why do we always build above ground? Like, why don't we build more underground? You start going down that rabbit hole, literally, and you start realizing that there's really no real reason we don't do it, other than that's just not the way it's done. Part of what I want to do is use the earth to heat and cool our house. I take a lot of inspiration from earthship building, and so I want to incorporate a lot of that into our design. Don't get me wrong, the ground is very hard out here, but I've literally already had holes dug out here that are 6 to 8 feet deep. I don't know why we don't build more underground. You look at the normal house in a normal suburban neighborhood. Every time that air conditioner fires up, you use an extreme amount of electricity to keep your house cool or to keep it warm. It's off the charts. It's crazy how much energy we use. If you had your house in ground, you would spend a fraction, if not almost zero, to keep it hot and cool, because the earth regulates the temperature for your house. It might be more expensive to initially dig to go underground. Maybe it's for lighting, maybe it's aesthetics. There's probably a lot of reasons. The corporate machine has a way of doing things, and it's just not part of it. I notice as humans, we don't end up doing things that make sense a lot of times until it's too late, until we have to. And then it seems like all of a sudden we make the decision, you know, it might be a good idea to build houses underground, after we've been doing it wrong for so many years. So I don't really know the answer to that question, but I did realize that that is something I want to do. If there were to be pillars of self-sufficiency, I would think growing your own food is one of the main pillars. And I think it just kind of goes with this lifestyle, and it kind of goes without saying if you think of what self-sufficiency means. And growing your own food is important. It's challenging, it's fun. I think growing your own food is something that everybody should know how to do. And I think whether you live in an apartment or you live in a house or you live in a homestead, I know this for a fact because when I lived in suburbia, in a HOA neighborhood, I grew trays and trays of microgreens inside my dining room in a very small space. So it can totally be done. Growing mushrooms is another thing that people can do. It's something I want to learn how to do, but it's all part of a process. You're not going to learn it overnight. There's definitely a learning curve to it, but eventually I would like to be almost, I don't think I'll ever be 100%, self-sufficient on our food. I think we're always going to want to go to the grocery store and get goodies and all that, but I do think that I can be almost self-sufficient on my own food. As an ex-fighter, I would say the best thing to do is just jump into it and get after it, because the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to kill a plant. That's the worst thing that can happen. It's really not that high of a risk, to get in there and start gardening. And you will figure it out, trust me. I can't emphasize that enough. I've seen myself evolve from, I literally didn't know how to grow anything. I know a lot of people say that, but I really didn't. You figure it out. And gardening is really good for a lot of reasons. The reason I think it helps with depression is because it helps you to focus on the task at hand, and you really have to have good observations when you're growing plants to see what's going on, because there's a plethora of things that can happen. So when you're growing life like that, you have to make observations. Am I watering it enough? Am I watering it too much? Is there a nutrient shortage here? Is it getting enough light? Is it this? Is it that? And so every time I would grow plants, it forced me to go through these check boxes until I got it right. And the challenge of it is there's so many different types of plants that every plant has its own requirements on its own light, and it grows a certain time of year. So I think just dive in and get after it. That's the best way to learn anything, in my opinion. Don't worry about failing. What do I hope out of all this? And the answer has changed. It changes with how long I've been out here. Initially, all I hoped to accomplish when I first moved out here was to just build a house. That's all I really wanted to do. And then since I've been out here longer, and I realized that, wow, there's actually a lot you can do out here. My ultimate goal is to have a self-sustainable household/homestead and a farm that is 100% operated off of rainwater. That's my ultimate goal out here, is I want to use 100% rainwater in the desert and have a profitable farm, which is a big goal. So that's what I hope to do. The greater purpose is the environment, but it's also, I feel that this is, because of my background, because I was a semi-professional athlete, for me it's very important to keep moving constantly. I can't sit at a computer. I can't do a lot of those things like a lot of normal people can do. So for me, I constantly have to be moving. This is the least I've moved in days. So for me, it's almost just part of my DNA that I have to be constantly moving, and the exercise alone is good for you. And I have a neighbor up the hill who's in his late 70s, and the guy moves around all day, every day. And I look at him and I say, that's what I want to be like at that age. And he's lived this lifestyle for 30, 40 years. I can see it, and it's basically use it or lose it. If you don't move your body around and you don't get out there and do physical activity and you hire everything out, that's fine. You might get it done quicker, but at what cost? And to me, the health is, like I said earlier, health is everything. And if you don't have your health, then it doesn't matter what you accomplish. You're not going to have it because you're going to be dealing with those problems. So for me, it's the health, the mental health too, the mental health. Being able to work physically by yourself is very good for introspection. You can be an introspective person and you're able to think through your own problems instead of having outside influences tell you why you're the way you are, why this is the way it is. You start asking questions that you may not ask. The greatest thing that I have learned about myself, I'm actually a lot smarter than I thought I was. And I mean that in a way of saying that there's all kinds of intelligence, and you learn that there's so many different aspects of being smart, and I was able to figure things out I never thought I would figure out. And so it made me have more confidence in my own ability to think through problems, because you have to problem solve all the time out here. That's one thing that I failed to mention is if you want to problem solve, homesteading will do it for you. You're going to learn to problem solve because things go wrong all the time. The very first week we moved out here, the property completely flooded. We hadn't had rain in years, and all of a sudden we decided, Mother Nature decided to unleash the fury, and this whole property flooded down here. And the problem with that is that I had been building that earth bag structure, and the earth bag didn't have a roof on it, and I didn't have a retaining wall to stop the water from going in there. Now what had ended up happening is that building completely flooded, and it was 3.5 feet underwater. We also had some of our personal belongings in there because we didn't think it was going to rain. That was really our fault completely, but it was the worst thing that's happened because it was almost like a welcome from the property to me to say, welcome to living off grid. And I thought I had every plan figured out. So, it was one of those things that it made me quickly learn to respect the weather, and I respect nature, because these monsoons are no joke out here. You might be maybe averse to having challenges, but once you throw yourself into the mix and you get used to doing that, which I was lucky enough early in my life to get to do that, to throw myself into extremely challenging situations. And to me, that's what gives me life out here. It makes me want to get up every day. If I know I got to wake up and there were no challenges in my life and everything was just kind of there and handed to me, I definitely wouldn't feel as young as I do now, so I feel, it makes me feel younger. I've lost like 30 pounds out here too. One thing that people need to know out here, when you start looking into homesteading or living a lifestyle of self-sufficiency, the first thing that pops in your head is you need to buy land. Now you got to be careful with that because that's almost a corporate machine telling you that you need to do these things, and you don't need to do that. The reason I got land wasn't because I couldn't do this in my backyard to a certain degree. It was because of personal choice. I would say that I spend 90% of my time in less than 2,000 square feet. Okay, so I'm literally spending almost all my time in this area back here, and we have 17 acres, and I don't even go to some of it. Sometimes this has been the first time I've been to some of these places, in forever. I will say it's definitely a misconception that you have to have land to homestead. I wish I had the pictures to show you, but I had all kinds of stuff set up in my backyard and even in my house. I mean, there's people running full-scale operations in their dining room. So to learn how to grow a plant, you don't want to learn it out here. You want to learn it in your house when you have all these comforts, when you have running water, when you have electricity, and you have all these things. I would say that you will surprise yourself if you actually just get in there and get after it and learn. It just fail. Just tell yourself you're going to fail. Go buy a bunch of seed packs and say, all right, I'm going to fail at this, but I'm going to see how it goes. And you'll pick up more and more every time. That's the best advice I can give you. If you want to learn how to weld, go to school. I mean, there's schools that'll teach you how to weld. I mean, you want to pick these trades up before you come out here, I mean, that's the thing. So I definitely think be proactive. You don't want to be reactive. You don't react and say, oh, I got land, so now I need to learn all these things. You need to say, nope, I have a plan. I'm going to do all this stuff. I started homesteading 4 years before I bought property. My wife and I bought property. That's the truth. I had been doing this. I had a Facebook page set up for this stuff that was around to prove it back in like 2018. So I had been doing this long before I came out here and watching and learning and just evolving that way. So I kind of hit the ground running when I came out here. So, I had a plan.
Hire us to tell your story. As an independent team of filmmakers, we love producing documentaries for artisans of all trades, honoring skill, passion, and determination.
The fruits of our labor literally creates happiness.
Founded in 2020, we harness our collective experience and enthusiasm for storytelling to deliver content that resonates with viewers on every level.
Think big and think outside of the box.
We avoid the constant noise of clickbait news and outrage headlines, instead crafting more intimate narratives that touch on the purpose of life itself. Stories that not only inform but also inspire. Whether it's the art of agriculture, the science of fermentation, an innovative garage startup, or the intricacies of off-grid living, we're here to explore it all and invite you to join us in the discovery.
You're just working with what you have at hand instead of having unrealistic expectations.
We know the world is brimming with hidden stories waiting to be told. These are tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things.
The biggest thing is to realize that there's nothing that you can't do.
Embodying the American spirit that with hard work, dreams really can come true. So whether you're a garage baker, homegrown mycologist, backyard farmer, or off-grid homesteader, send us a message and share your story with the world.